to introduce Pat Pitsel, our guest speaker. Pat holds a doctorate degree in psychology, and she also has run her own consulting business since 1982. We had the privilege of hearing Pat speak at the closing of the Holy, and she told us many stories about the Holy at the closing. And so we thought it was fitting she was here today to help us unveil these statues honoring the Grey Nuns who founded the hospital and the school and the graduates who graduated from the School of Nursing they established over 100 years ago. Thank you.
If walls could talk, what stories they would tell, and what secrets they know. Some of you are looking distinctly nervous. The people who are responsible for this marvelous tribute to the Holy Cross nuns and sisters and nurses could tell you far more about those stories because they live them on a daily basis. My connection to the Holy, I must admit, was far more tenuous. I graduated from St. Mary's Girls High School a few years ago. It used to be just to the north of here, and every day at lunch we would walk by the hospital blithely unaware of everything that was going on inside. My sister was born at the Holy Cross Hospital. My father survived his first serious coronary due to the care and attention he received here. But as a child and a non-patient, I would never have been permitted in a hospital room. Children were to be seen, maybe, but definitely not beyond the waiting area. The Holy has had many walls, beginning with the first structure in 1891, a 24-foot square building that had room for 4 patients. Today, most of our children have bedrooms that are larger than 24 square feet. 4 patients that could be accommodated at one time. I guess they thought that misery loved company, close company. The building was unfinished, and the proposed plans were to expand to accommodate 8 patients. Pretty Spartan accommodations, right? However, those first nursing sisters knew that you cannot let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. And those first set of walls whispered, "Service to others is the rent that we pay for the space we occupy on earth." Calgary was proclaimed a city 3 years after their arrival in 1894, with a thriving and growing population of anywhere between 4,000 to 6,000. Population counts varied depending on the source. Perhaps the census taking was voluntary at that time as well. The railway had arrived a year earlier, bringing hundreds of people seeking adventure, a new life, free or virtually free land, and excitement. The first Calgary General Hospital had opened in 1890 in a rented house on the corner of 7th Street and 7th Avenue Southwest. The Grey Nuns of Montreal, however, were known throughout the West since they had established a hospital in St. Boniface, Manitoba in 1871 after traveling 59 days from Montreal, including canoeing and portaging. You can imagine in their early habits what an event that must have been. In 1891, they were, as you've heard, invited by Bishop Grandin to establish a Catholic hospital to accommodate the rapidly growing population in Calgary. Thomas Hesburgh, a former president of Notre Dame University, said, "The very essence of leadership is that you have to have vision. You can't blow an uncertain trumpet." And the vision and leadership shown by the bishop was to have a significant impact on this city for the next century. The first arrivals in January 1891, again as you heard, were 4 Grey Nuns from Montreal. A Chinese proverb says, "If you want happiness for an hour, take a nap. If you want happiness for a day, go fishing. If you want happiness for a month, get married. If you want happiness for a year, inherit a fortune. If you want happiness for a lifetime, help somebody else." The sisters, who took a personal vow of poverty among others, were always good at scrounging. So they found secondhand furniture and equipment and accepted their first patient in April. The little hospital was often overcrowded, and the sisters would sleep on the floor or in the cold attic so the patients could have their beds. A new building was definitely needed, and the site was chosen the following year, in 1892, on the banks of the Elbow River, where we're now standing. The land was donated by the Oblate Fathers, who also chipped in with 2,500 bricks. I don't know where the Oblates got the bricks. The new building was 50 square feet and 3 stories high. What a monument. Additional construction added to the structure occurred as the population and need increased, and that occurred in 1906, 1907, 1913, 1928. In those days, they didn't tear down old buildings just to build something new. They just added on. And so, like Topsy, the little hospital just grew and grew. And less than a year after the end of the Great War in 1919, the hospital was classified as a Group A hospital with 200 beds and all the required appliances. Who would have believed that it was possible to achieve all this? The story of the growth of the Holy Cross reminds me of the Queen in Alice in Wonderland. "There's no use trying," said Alice. "One can't believe in impossible things." "I dare say you haven't had much practice," said the Queen. "When I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." Those early walls would have heard the cries of the suffering and the dying, of course, and words of consolation that the nuns would have given when the patient was beyond any help that the medical knowledge of that time could provide. Of course, as Norman Cousins remarked, death is not the greatest loss in life. The greatest loss is what dies inside us while we live. The last addition to the Holy was constructed in 1928 and was henceforth forever referred to as the New Wing. Nursing was a hazardous affair in those early days, not just because of the rudimentary conditions in which they operated, but because of the high rate of mortality due to various infectious and communicable diseases that swept through the area. A measles epidemic, some writers claim that it was really smallpox, overwhelmed the city in 1892 and required the isolation of many patients. The city put the infected up in tents and then asked the Grey Nuns if they would look after them there. This they did, of course, going into quarantine themselves. Diphtheria broke out in the following 2 summers. More sisters came from Montreal to help, but they all had their hands full. Typhoid and diphtheria epidemics and even smallpox in 1908 continued to plague Calgary's early years, culminating in the horrendous Spanish flu epidemic at the end of the Great War. However, they seem to firmly believe that adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. I suspect that their unofficial motto was, "We're all faced with a series of great opportunities brilliantly disguised as impossible situations." In 1907, the Holy Cross of Nursing was established under the direction of Sister Fafard, and in 1910, 5 lay nurses became the first graduates of the school. Early nursing training was not for the weak or the timorous. While one would not go so far as to suggest that nursing students was the polite name for slave labor, it was certainly true with respect to the time that young women who entered the nursing field worked hard, and worked long. Early nursing students did not have the luxury of attending formal classroom lectures before practical work began. Instead, they were thrust right into the work, beginning with bedpans and bed beneath and working up to more complex patient care as the 3 years went by. The hours were long, 10, 12-hour shifts, discipline rigorous, expectations high. Young women who had largely been protected from the vicissitudes of life were abruptly thrust into life and death situations. Girls who perhaps had never had the facts of life explained to them in any great detail now dealt with the facts of life. Many would be the time that they would return to their small rooms after their shift, wondering if they could make it, if they could stand it, if they could even survive the exhaustion and the seeming unending demands. The nuns, of course, believed if you have time to whine and complain about something, then you've got time to do something about it. In 1922, the Holy Cross Hospital expanded its residence for student nurses by purchasing the Waterloo Apartments and the Forbes home and created residence for 144 nurses and students. What luxury! For almost 50 years, this was home to the young women who came from all over southern Alberta to enter the nursing program until, again, as you heard, in 1977. During the 1970s, the 3-year hospital-based diploma program fell victim to declining enrollment and a tight job market for nurses in Canada. The Holy Cross School of Nursing ceased enrollment in September 77, with the June 79 graduates being the last to receive their diplomas from the school. By its closing, they had graduated nearly 2,500 nurses. We all know the eventual fate of the hospital itself, so there's no need to revisit that. The Holy Cross, like the Calgary General, were both, shall we say, decommissioned, although the Holy at least managed to hold on to its walls. And it's these walls that hold our city history and the history of the women who passed through here as sisters or nurses, nuns or nightingales, bringing compassion and healing and hope. Margaret Thatcher once said, "When I'm out of politics, I'm going to run a business. It's going to be called Rent a Spine." Well, more than 100 years after the founding of the Holy Cross, we can see that we still have women with a spine, as a group of determined graduates set themselves the task of ensuring that this work would never be forgotten. Of course, the stories of courage tend to upset without ending, but we have here an example of the courage begun so many decades ago, the courage of those first nuns and those first nightingales. In preparing for this occasion, I went back to this site and I talked to the walls. What message do you have, you walls who heard so much? What messages and lessons did you capture within your boundaries? And this is what they told me. I asked for strength, and God gave me difficulties to overcome. I asked for wisdom, and God gave me problems to solve. I asked for prosperity. God gave me brain and brawn to work. I asked for courage, and God gave me danger to overcome. I asked for love, and God gave me troubled people to help. I asked for favors, and God gave me opportunities. I received nothing I wanted. I received everything I needed. Remember that the true cost of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. The true cost of this is not in dollars, but in time which can neither be saved, recycled, nor reused. We are grateful to all those nuns and nightingales who put their lives into healing. They gave us their lives. Today, we give them our thanks.